Born in Trier, Germany in 1818 was Karl Marx. He came from Jewish descent before his father, Heinrich Marx, joined the state evangelical church. Heinrich was a follower of Enlightenment thinkers such as Immanuel Kant, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Voltaire. Karl Marx was baptized when he was 6, and 11 years later, when he was 17, he traveled to the University of Bonn, where he studied philosophy. Like his father, he followed Enlightenment thinkers. Immanuel Kant, Hegel, and Charles Darwin were some of the notable influences on the young Marx.
Marx gets off really reading Hegel, and his main idea as a post-Enlightenment thinker is the idea that the universe does not need to be understood, it needs to be changed, which is an absurd thing to say, because why would you change the universe unless you first understand it?
In 1848, Marx authored the Communist Manifesto, along with Friedrich Engels. Engels, too, was heavily influenced by Enlightenment thinkers. Hegel was probably the biggest influence on Engels, as he adopted the Hegelian dialectic, a method that directly opposes the foundation of Christianity. Engels grew up in a Protestant home, became agnostic, and after being influenced by Hegel's ideas, he ended up a militant atheist.
Ultimately, the Enlightenment is a stark rejection of the idea that you can know much or anything about the universe, and a radical positing of skepticism. And it goes against the happy-sounding, beneficent-sounding name, the Enlightenment. It ultimately stands for that proposition, whether we're talking about empiricist Enlightenment thinkers or rationalist Enlightenment thinkers. It winds up producing the kind of practical and political philosophy that's based around the idea that there's no understanding of the universe. It's the opposite of that name. And all there really is, at the end of the day, is power for the taking. And that's Marxism.
In the Communist Manifesto, the communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. They declare their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. The forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. The existing social condition that needs to be overthrown in order for Marxism to thrive is religion. It's for this Marx wrote his famous slam of religion, most often translated as, "Religion is the opium of the people." Opium is a drug that dulls the senses and helps one forget present sufferings. Religion, therefore, in the eyes of the followers of Marxism, is good for maintaining the status quo. But since it embraces suffering rather than tries to get rid of it, it must be done away with.
On a practical level, the things that he opposed was this notion of the essential dignity of the human person. For Marxism, in fact, St. John Paul II really put it very well. He said the problem with socialism is essentially an anthropological problem. It's a misconception of who the human being is, who human persons are.
Religion, specifically Christianity, teaches that suffering must be endured in the earthly life in order for happiness in the eternal life to be obtained. Marxism teaches the opposite. Instead of embracing suffering, it's seen as an evil that must be done away with. Therefore, a utopia, or a heaven, or a paradise on earth is the goal of Marxism.
And this was interesting. She said, "I'm a Christian and a Marxist." And I thought, no.
For Marxists, there is nothing beyond this life, this world, so total control of it becomes a necessity.
In a very serious way, Marxism poses itself as the alternative salvific message to the world, and that socialist man would be the perfection of the human condition. So it's a real anti-Christ in that sense.
The last stages of Marxism are socialism and communism. That is the goal, the final end of Marxism, world domination. Real-world examples of this philosophy are clearly evidenced in Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin. They showed the world what Marxism looks like in practice. The Soviets were the first to create the prison camp system, the Gulag, where citizens were sent merely for philosophically disagreeing with Soviet propaganda. Millions were shipped to the camps, and in fact, the Gulag was the model employed by Hitler for the Nazi camp system. Torture, starvation, and executions were the norm employed by the communist state as it set about establishing heaven on earth. Lenin turned Russia, and then the wider Soviet Union, into a one-party communist state, governed by the Soviet Communist Party. His own ideology was a variant built on Marxism called Leninism Marxism. This was the official state ideology of the Soviet Union and other parties in the Eastern Bloc. The Red Terror, led by Lenin, resulted in the slaughter of an estimated 100 to 200,000 Russians from 1917 to 1922. Some estimates run into the millions. Lenin took over Russia on November 8, 1917. 4 months earlier, on July 13, 1917, in the little village of Fatima, Portugal, the Queen of Heaven, in an apparition to 3 peasant children, said, "Russia will spread its errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, and various nations will be annihilated." Important to note here, the Bolshevik Revolution had not yet occurred, and there is no conceivable way 3 little children on the opposite end of the continent could know about the coming revolution.
The Russian errors that have spread all through the globe now, talked about by Sister Lucy, as told to her by Our Lady of Fatima, were most notably kind of in the marquee economic errors of Russia, economic Marxism, communism, and all the different variant forms of socialism. On the right wing, we've been keen to talk about these, avoid socialism, avoid communism. The other errors not noted were the sexual errors. The sexual errors of Russia, though, of Soviet Russia, they're completely ubiquitous. They spread all around the world. We no longer recognize the sexual revolution as being a Bolshevik thing because every Western country has these huge problems with sexuality, out-of-wedlock birth rates, LGBTQ, transgenderism, gender dysphoria, and basically just, sexual carousing run amok.
Marx's ideas targeted religion, specifically the Catholic Church, as the Mother of God revealed at Fatima. An embodiment of this attack against the Church was Antonio Gramsci, the founding member and leader of the Italian Communist Party who pledged full for the goals of Lenin's murderous Russian Revolution. He did, however, dispute some of the tactics. In 1867, Marx penned a second book, Das Kapital, and in it laid out specific steps for bringing about world revolution. While Gramsci supported the same goal, he said they are not Marxists in a strict way. He said they would forswear some statements of Kapital, but refused to take it as an external little doctrine full of dogmatic and indisputable statements. Gramsci didn't believe Lenin saw Marxism as dogma. While Lenin killed hundreds of thousands, probably millions, he wasn't perverting minds as much as Gramsci thought he should. Gramsci recognized the Catholic Church as the largest and most powerful private organization that has ever existed. He understood the Church's mission to spread Catholicism around the world, and it's his correct analysis of the Catholic Church that led him to say that socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. Socialism and communism both push for state-owned enterprises and state control over all aspects of economic life, eventually crushing human dignity.
I have to give it to Marx and to Engels, his colleague and sometimes ghostwriter, because they understood this as well. They understood that you needed to defeat private property if you were going to defeat the family, what they called the present understanding of the family, and these were related. What he saw as patriarchy, but they were really talking about the family. So the Marxist antagonism isn't just to property itself, it's to the family, because property safeguards the family.
Socialism is the 5th stage of Marxism, and going back to the Communist Manifesto, Marx tells us that the theory of communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property.
Private property is good, and the abolition of private property is bad, because ultimately the principle of justice, which is a natural principle, reduces to nothing more than giving to each his due. So when somebody has private property, all that means is that they converted some material thing through their labor to what we call their property. This was a major attack in the French Revolution under Napoleon. The other main way we get private property, besides converting it through labor to our own, is also a justice principle. It is to bequeath your private property to those that you want to bequeath it to, or sell it. That's called alienability when you sell it. Bequeathing when you pass it to your kids. It's yours originally at the top of the chain through someone's labor, and then they have the right to do with it what they want to pass to their kids. Napoleon in the French Revolution made it illegal to pass certain kinds of property to your kids.
Pope Pius XI declared religious socialism, Christian socialism are contradictory terms, for no one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a true socialist.
They're not just different, like they're opposite. You know, it's not just variant 1 and variant 2. These are like seriously different ideas.
Communism is the final stage of Marxism. This is where the utopia, or the heaven, or paradise on earth is said to be brought to fruition. No need for money, competition, private property, governments, states, nations, and especially no need for religion, because the society is completely classless. The Church has always condemned this final stage of Marxism, and Pope Pius XII's 1949 decree against communism excommunicates all Catholics collaborating with or voting for communist organizations.
When you entice the viewer of an action film to stop rooting for the good guy and to start rooting for the bad guy, you pervert the soul. That's what communism does. When you entice the viewer of a basketball or a football game to feel sorry for the team that's losing and to really let them win even though they don't deserve to win, you're corrupting the soul of the viewer of that game. When you take from someone that worked really hard to earn something and you give it to somebody else who hasn't worked hard, who was sleeping in till 1 or 2 p.m. when that other guy was working really hard and getting up at 6 a.m. to get that thing, you're corrupting the soul.
In 2018, another man by the name of Marx spoke pure Marxist ideals. The problem is, this Marx is a Catholic cardinal, Reinhard Marx of Germany. The heretical prelate openly declared, "We are all on the shoulders of Karl Marx. Without Karl Marx, there would be no Catholic social teaching." With so-called Catholic news sites saying that socialism is compatible with Catholic social teaching and even trying to make a Catholic case for communism, there's no question Russia's errors are still spreading to this day.